Hello and welcome to the first episode of Ask a DM, the show where I get questions from you and other community members and I bring on a guest DM to answer them. And today I have with me Rich Merry, who I'm just going to bring on the screen. And if you just want to introduce who you are, Rich, quickly, just in case people don't know.
Hi, my name's Rich, and I do D&D videos about subclasses, about all sorts of different things. I'm sure there'll be a link down in the description about my channel, but if you're interested, check it out.
Perfect. And if you do want to ask any questions and you're live in the chat, just make sure to put question at the beginning of it so we know that you're asking a question to us rather than discussing amongst yourselves. And over on my Discord channel, I do have an area where you can ask questions there. If you're watching this after the fact, put some questions down in the comments as well, and then I can get to them next week. And we've already got a question for you, Rich. Not sure if you've seen it, but Dungeoneer's Pack.
Go ahead.
Can you confirm or deny that you're a sentient pumpkin?
Well, that's going to be the VTuber model that's rolling out next month, so we'll wait and see what happens.
All right. So before we jump into these questions, then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Rich, to work out what sort of DM you are. I feel like that's going to help people because there's actually quite a wide range of DMs out there. So, do you homebrew your own content or do you run pre-made?
Well, I always start with a base of pre-mades, like one of the written campaigns, but it always goes off the rails. So you kind of homebrew and improvise as you go, and then you're furiously writing up stat blocks for the next week.
And are you more of a planner or are you more of an improviser, would you say?
Oh, total improviser. I think you have to play off the energy of the players. It's not just all about putting them on a railroad. I'm a very sandboxy sort of DM.
Good. So out of the books that you have started with at the beginning, what's been your favourite adventure so far?
I know it's a cliche to say The Lost Mines of Phandelver, but I'd say Lost Mines is number one, and then probably Rime of the Frost Maiden is a close second. Okay. I know it has some issues in chapter 3 onwards, but I think it's got some great early level content in it.
And so do you prefer early levels compared to later game?
Well, I think playing at the earlier levels, you're going to have more games. As the longer the campaign goes on, the less likely you are going to continue. So if you're having, how would I put this? If you're having level 1 to 5 campaigns, 3 of them in the space of time it would take to get a campaign from 1 to 20, you're probably going to have more fun trying out new characters and just getting a better feel for it.
Yeah, very good point there. I've got a question coming from Carl Cow as well. Can you practice winging it? Is that a practicable skill?
Yeah, just fail upwards. It's like, how would I describe it? It's like going to the gym and exercising. If you practice a little bit every week, you're going to get better and better over time. But there's no silver bullet. There's no magic potion you can drink just to be a fantastic DM.
Other than steroids. For the gym, we do not condone that. I guess the point is the first time you do it, you're probably going to be bad, or you're not going to be at your best unless you're a natural, I guess. But yeah, just keep practicing. And there is, as I've never actually done it, but there's a lot of people out there that also say take improv classes, improv acting classes. I've never done it myself, but that's another little tip in case you did want to do it.
Well, I think when you're developing your own DM style, starting out, you have no idea what you're going to go with. But some people are more naturally inclined to gravitate towards the role play and acting side of things, and more people like the more grindy, mechanical video game style. But it's about finding your own feet. Try everything, and if you don't like it, move on to the next thing.
What would you say your usual session? What would you say the split between combat, exploration, and roleplay is roughly?
Well, I try to get at least one bit of combat in every session, but generally speaking, sometimes it's all combat, sometimes there's no combat at all. Sometimes it's just a beach episode where everyone's buying potions and doing downtime. It all depends. Like I said, you have to read the room. If there's high energy or if people are interested in going into a dungeon, then lace down some traps and see what happens.
Cool. And are you a roll table kind of guy? Do you use roll tables very often?
I prefer making my own roll tables. I know it's way, way, way too time consuming, but the idea of having a 1 in 100 chance of getting something is just really exciting to create. So I prefer making them over rolling on them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, let's jump into the questions then. So most of these are from over on Twitter. So we got Strange Mist, who asked, how do you deal with big hiatuses between sessions and games, which is pretty relevant at the moment. There's obviously people haven't been able to get together, and now they are again. So how would you deal with that?
Just find the person that makes the notes. There's always one person that writes way too many notes. Get them to do a recap or something like that, and have an introduction session. If you're in between a large campaign setting, then just take a session, go into a tavern and do a bit of role play. Feel it out. Like I said, I'm more of an improvisational person, so just feed off the crowd.
Yeah, and I think something for me when I haven't played in quite a long time, I struggle to get into the zone. I struggle to get excited sometimes, especially when I've completely forgotten what has been going on and stuff like that. And to get me over that, I go and watch a D&D stream. So there's obviously the big ones like Critical Role and High Rollers and stuff like that. And I go and watch one of those streams, maybe a couple of those streams, and that gets me back in the zone. That gets me excited to go and create content and have good times with friends again. So that's if what you're struggling with is getting back into the zone and get back into the mindset of playing D&D again, go and watch others play it. If you're into that, some people don't like watching others play D&D, which is fine. But yeah, go.
Have you got any movies that get you in the mood for playing D&D?
Well, Lord of the Rings is the obvious one, I would say. Most people like Lord of the Rings. Actually, there's two recent ones that I don't think the films actually did very well in the box offices. But it's King Arthur, the new King Arthur with I forgot his name, the guy from Vikings and Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, the Geordie guy. I know who you're talking about.
Really thought that
Charlie
was just
Cunningham or something like that.
I'm gonna have to do a little Google. I can't remember his name.
No. Fact checking is going to ruin the podcast.
But yeah, we don't actually know everything, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that is actually a really good film. I could see it just being a D&D campaign. What's his name? Yeah, Charlie Hunnam. Well done. And then the other one as well was also the most recent Robin Hood with Taron Egerton. Did you see that one?
I didn't.
That was really interesting as well.
I was going to recommend the Witcher series as well. If you watch some of that, that'll definitely get you started.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so there's quite a lot out there, really. One as well, which is a little bit more light, is the Snow White and the Huntsman films. If you've ever seen them as well, it sounds like it should be some Disney princess thing, but it's really not. It's a D&D campaign. It's exactly what it is, really.
I know it's not a D&D themed movie, but I think the best way to describe my DM style is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Everything's going wrong, but it's progressing the story forward.
Perfect. That sounds good. Yeah, we'll definitely have to play with it together at some point. Okay, next question then. So the Necromancer. Do you like spending goals on minor things? So do you track arrows, for example?
I think in lower levels, level 1 to 5, you're counting every single piece of silver you have. And you're kind of balancing the books, and usually there's one person that's responsible for collecting all the gold in the party. But when you get to later levels, it's just a case of, do I have 10,000 to buy the boat? No, then let's do something else. So it depends on the scale of the game, depends on the level as well.
Yeah, for me, it also depends what type of game you're playing. So like Rime of the Frost Maiden is a bit survival-esque, I believe. I've never actually ran it, but I've read most of it. And if you're running a campaign which is, they're lost in the jungle and stuff like that, then maybe tracking stuff like that is a bit more important. But yeah, if you're in a city all the time, you can just hand wave some stuff and be like,
well, okay, there is an exception. If you're playing rogue, then make sure you count every single piece of gold you get and make sure you spend it on the most ridiculously outlandish things.
Yeah, like a big hat.
Oh,
happened in
yes.
one of our games, like a big over-the-top hat. Okay, so if you could rename any spell or item, which one would you go for? And what would you
Well, that's a
rename
good
it to?
question. That's a very good question. My first thought is Eldritch Blast, but I don't know what to rename it to.
Yeah,
Oh, honestly, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
it is one of those ones which is a bit harsh, just throwing it on you like this. Can I think of any? I think I actually can't think of any either.
No.
I'm trying to
You know
think
what?
of one which
How about
doesn't make
this?
sense.
We'll come back to it next week.
Yeah, see,
Give you some time to think.
and down in the comments or in the live chat, if you're live, if there's any that you think as well, let us know. So when you're running monsters, this is by Abyssal Brews. When you're running monsters, do you guys do much tweaking to the stat block, or do you just run them as is?
Do you want to answer this one first?
Yeah, so so most of the tweaking I do to stat blocks is if there is a monster that isn't the level I want it to be, I make it the level I want it to be. So, for example, I really like rust monsters because I like the dynamic that they sort of ruin your equipment, but they're really easy to kill. So I would put them up some CR if it was like a level 10 party that I wanted them to have that encounter. So that's most of the tweaking I do to a stat block is just making it go up or down in level. I don't do a huge amount to actually change the dynamic of the monster. What
I
about
think
you?
when you get some more important characters to the game, to the story, for example, a boss goblin, then of course you tweak the stat block to give it some more personality. But generally speaking, I think a lot of the stat blocks work quite well. There are some exceptions where you get like CR level 1 creatures that can one-hit kill a wizard, which is kind of absurd. But generally, generally they're okay.
Yeah. Another thing I do sometimes as well is just change the damage type. So if, for example, there's like fire salamanders in the monster manual, but if I wanted there to be a frost salamander, I'd use the exact same stat block, just change it from fire damage to frost damage, and that also works quite well.
Well, there's a good idea. If you're tweaking the stat block as a DM, don't always make it more powerful, but you can tweak it so that some of the players, if they have frost spells, for example, make it weak to frost, and it allows the players to feel more powerful. Makes them have more fun.
Yeah,
Well, fun's not guaranteed, but you know what I mean.
yeah, definitely. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So, should there always be a boss in a dungeon, or at the end of a dungeon, or can you just have a dungeon full of minions?
I think there should always be a boss at the end, and I'll tell you why. A good dungeon has the same flow and rhythm of a good movie or a good TV series. You want a climax, you want something that's exciting, a goal at the end of it. So even if it's not just a boss like a dark elf wizard or something like that, if you're having the cavern cave in or some dramatic event, they need to escape because there's a dragon arriving. You want to really swell up the tension and make the players feel like they've achieved something at the end. And then afterwards, you'll have more of a chilled out downtime period.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's just a good general point to help DMs get better. Is that players always want to feel like they achieve something after an encounter. This is one of my gripes with random encounters on the road. Is a lot of the time it's like, oh, you throw 2 wolves at them, and they have to fight 2 wolves, and it's like, great, I've fought 2 wolves. Now let's just walk to where we were getting to, and it's a barrier. And at the end of that encounter, they're not like, "Yeah, we achieved something good. We made the story go forward, or we got this cool bit of loot, or something like that." So that's a really good bit of advice for all of the all D&D really.
Well, here's one more thing I want to say about that before we finish up. With the idea of random roll encounters and long distance traveling, sometimes a DM will add an extra combat encounter just to pad out the time because they don't have anything planned. So they say, oh no, we'll need to wait until the next session to see what happens. But in reality, in the back of their head, they're thinking, thank goodness that I put that combat there.
Yeah, definitely. I Yeah, I've had some of the best experiences from just making up stuff to pad out time, and it's actually ended up having big impacts on the story. And then when you're working out what's going to happen with the rest of the campaign, you're like, that actually changed so much. So that's sort of screwed over all of my plans, and I have to start again. But that's part of the fun of being a DM, really. You get to,
Well, the players. It doesn't matter how well you plan something. The players are going to go in the opposite direction. It's guaranteed. So have fun with it.
indeed. You said that you had some questions as well for me and for us to discuss.
Oh, there's Fry
Which,
Minis popped into the chat. How's it going? How's the? I know Josh and Dungeoneers Pack and Fry Minis just had a stream half an hour ago. You should check their channels out as well.
nice.
But,
Yeah,
so,
well, I was going to
Banderhog.
say, yeah, I'll bring it up. So, howdy, what is the best creature in D&D, and why is it the Banderhog?
So I think that when the Banderhob is not on screen, everyone should be asking, "Where is the Banderhob?" It's just one of those naturally charismatic creatures, you know. Has a great row of teeth as well.
Is it? Would you say that is one that is your best creature in D&D?
It's Fry's best creature. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question though. What is your favorite creature? Your favorite stat block in D&D?
So, favorite stat block. Well, that's interesting. I quite like a lot of the undead ones, which like reduce strength. I feel like the first time you throw that at your players, they freak out. They're like, "Wait, this can take my strength away. How do I get it back?" And especially if they're new players, they don't understand how. So I quite like a lot of the undead. I also just have a soft spot for beholders. The different ways. It's not overly interesting, but I just really enjoy playing them. And people don't. I feel like if your players know D&D, then they're like, oh, they understand that there's 10 ways and they do different things. But the first time you play that, throw that at someone who doesn't understand what a beholder is, they freak out and they're like, oh, my magic doesn't work anymore. What do I do? So that's a great one. What about you?
The first time I encountered a beholder was not in a D&D game. This is a little bit of a tangent, but there's a video game called Dragon's Dogma, and in some of the DLC, you go into these underground catacombs, and it takes some inspiration from Dark Souls. But then all of a sudden, I came to this like Colosseum area that was all worn down, and this big round creature with loads of eyes started attacking me. The difference was it was about 3 stories tall. So I think when they were developing the game, they lost the memo on the size scaling for the beholder. But yeah, it was a fearsome encounter. I think beholders are interesting because they do have that random element to them, and it's not just the stat block; they've got a great personality as well. It's always baked into the race.
Yeah, I agree. While we're on stat blocks, the next book that's coming out is about dragons, and I'm really hoping that they make them a bit more interesting, because most of the dragons at the moment, you got your claw attack, you got your tail attack, and then you've got a breath weapon, and that's it. Whereas in the past, they've had spell casting, they've had this, they've had that, they get frightful presence as well. So I'm really hoping that in this new book they add some really interesting dragon ideas to sort of revamp it a bit.
I'm looking forward to the new book as well because of the lore. I want to see different dragons, different chromatic dragons having different personalities, and maybe some famous dragon stat blocks as well. I've always liked the turtle dragon just because is it a dragon or is it a sea creature? You don't really know.
They use that pretty well in I forgot what the adventure's called. The one in the jungle. Curse? No, not Curse.
Is it one from Tales of the Yawning Portal, or am I
No, it's the one. Someone in the chat help me out. The one where you go. There's the curse, the death curse, and in the jungle. What's it called? Tomb of Annihilation. That's it. Yeah, they use a dragon turtle where basically to leave the port you have to give the dragon turtle gold or give it some sort of treasure, or it doesn't let you leave the port. It just destroys your boat. And but yeah, in the encounter, most of the players don't actually know they have to do that. So yeah, and a quick shout out to 2 excellent beards. Thank you, Fry. I didn't even realize that we both have. We were talking before this as well that we both of our channels are orange. So and we've both got beards. So we're pretty much the same person.
Yeah,
that's how it works, isn't it?
It's just like Ant and Deck. There's one person, but there's smoke and mirrors to make it look like two.
Yeah, definitely. Well, another question then. So, where do you utilize passive skills beyond passive perception? Do you use any other passive skills?
I try to think outside the box and accommodate the skills of the players. For example, if you have a monk, naturally they're going to have high dexterity. So if they're in a role play situation like they're trying to negotiate with an enemy, then ask them to roll sleight of hand or something ridiculous like that. And it'll catch them off guard. They'll enjoy it because they get a massive bonus, but you can always try and make it strange and out of the way. Don't think traditionally when it comes to things like perception or religion or things like that.
I feel like the only one I use is passive insight. I use as well sometimes when it comes to just straight passive skills. But yeah,
Well,
I,
I
I
think
feel,
history and religion, when there's some law you want to try and drop,
yeah,
they can be used passively, but generally speaking, I think they need to rework the passive perception or the perception skill in general because it's something that people realize it's so essential to the game that there's always one person that just dumps all the stats into perception.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of newer DMs make is they want to share lore, but they put it behind a role. So they make the person do the history roll and they get a natural one, and then now the lore that you want the players to know can't be known, or you have to just hand wave it and be like, oh yeah, with a one, you know exactly what I wanted you to know.
Or you
So
can
yeah,
just
you're right.
let them
Just
trip over a tomb of all the different knowledge.
yeah, yeah. Okay, next one. So, what do you think is the most annoying or confusing rule in D&D 5e?
My first thought immediately goes to encumbrance. Is it necessary? It's a very min-maxy sort of thing. If you're trying to be super realistic, then yeah, that's your jam. Go for it. If you're more of the wargaming model side of things, then that's totally gonna. What's the word I'm looking for? Not rules lawyer, but there's when people are they prefer like crunchy gameplay sort of things.
Mm, yeah,
But I
okay.
think that, yeah, the last thing you want to do is count the weight of your arrowheads when you're trying to role play, you know? It's takes the focus away from the story and emphasizes more on the crunchy mechanics.
So, do you do any sort of encumbrance in your games? Like, as in, could someone carry 8 greatswords? Would you allow that in your game?
Well, within reason. I think I'd allow them to have 8 great swords for comic effect, but they can only use one at a time.
Yeah,
So that's obviously gonna encumber them when they're traveling long distances.
yeah. Do you play many games online, or are most of your games in person that you play?
I used to play a lot on Discord, actually, play by post,
Mhm.
which is not the
Okay,
traditional way of playing things. But when you're working and there's different time zones, it's really important just to log on when you can and try to interact as much as you can. The only downside with that is that sometimes combat encounters can literally take 2 or 3 months to finish. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
there's always the combat, and then on the different channel, there's role play, like a campfire role play section, so you don't have to be in combat or out of combat all of the time.
Makes sense. The only reason I was asking because I use Foundry VDT when I play online, and it tracks all of encumbrance and stuff like that automatically. So we generally have it on, and I don't think anyone has ever become encumbered. Like I just maybe it's my players, but they just never try picking up too much. Like they I guess in their heads they think, oh, actually I can't have this additional greatsword. That's stupid.
So they're
Which
thinking
is
more
quite interesting.
realistic, and they're thinking less like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, where you're
Yeah.
literally boosting up your strength just to carry more stuff.
Yeah, that you're probably never going to sell for more than 1 copper. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so next one. So this is by T Dungeonator on Twitter. Could painters count as bards?
Oh yeah, definitely. In fact, I'm surprised there's not a painter or a more creative artistic subclass for the bard. I know that in the what is the new block that's coming out soon that was based on the Magic the Gathering, Strixhaven. They
Hmm.
were going to release Strixhaven subclasses, and one of the schools was supposed to be more artistic, creative, dancer, painter sort of character, but now they've scrapped the subclasses. That's kind of free real estate. If anyone wants to design one of those, I'm sure it'll be popular. But when it comes to bards, painters, chefs, mechanics, if you want to stretch the realms of imagination, video game developers, that's art technically. I don't know how you'd incorporate it into a Forgotten Realms setting, but I'm sure you could figure a way out. Isekai them in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I played a bard once, which was a performer sword swallower. So they were a College of Swords bard, and yeah, they were a sword swallower on stage and stuff like that, and that's quite interesting. Different form of art to the normal music style. But yeah,
there's a challenge for anyone listening. If you want to design a bard class based around alcohol, brewing beer, ale, that sort of thing, there's an interesting idea.
Yeah, there you go. Go for it. Fry Minis to say, I like the idea of passive persuasion and intimidation impacting the NPC's initial reactions, which is a pretty good thing as well. So I don't think I've ever thought of doing that actually, like someone's passive intimidation affecting how the NPC deals with that player from the get-go. Usually I would see how the roleplay goes, and if they are, saying things which are a bit more intimidating, then it might change. But yeah, that's a good idea as well.
The only issue with that is you kind of painting your character into a one-dimensional reaction. I mean, if you're always going to look aggressive, then that might lead to interesting situations where you have to try and de-intimidate yourself and make yourself look more easy to approach.
Yeah, I agree. And Troy also said College of YouTubers as an idea that you can go and create there.
Yeah, College of YouTubers, the only problem is that they don't get any gold in the fights.
Yeah, in fact, they have it taken away somehow. Okay, next question. The town of Banshee asked, who was a memorable NPC or villain in one of your campaigns?
Oh, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, well, the first one that came to mind was Curse of Strahd. Was Strahd. There was the way I played Strahd was, I think he, before they even encountered him in any sort of combat, he had turned up in the campaign at least 10 times just to intimidate them and talk to them. So I feel like that was one of them. But he's pre-written and already made. And a memorable NPC was, so I had linked a character to someone's backstory by making them their brother that they didn't know was their brother. And he ended up asking them if he could come on an adventure with them, even though he was a kid. And it was supposed to be like a moral dilemma of like, how do they deal with this? Do they go, yeah, sure, come along, even though they're going into dangerous territory? Or do they politely decline? Or do they tell him, like, go away, leave me alone? And they took him along and he died. And they didn't work out that it was this girl's brother. And then they went through a whole side story to get him resurrected, got him resurrected, and he died again. And still, they didn't work out that it was a brother, and they didn't get him resurrected that time, just left him. And then a couple of sessions later, found out that it was her brother. So I feel like that, and I've actually completely forgotten his name. But yeah, that was probably the most memorable NPC I had in one of mine, just because he was so linked for so long. And yeah.
I think the most memorable NPC in one of my games, it was a Lost Mines of Phandelver game, the beginner's set. And we had, I think there was a wizard, rogue, a wizard, ranger, warlock, and cleric, but they didn't really have any frontline attack. So I had to try and take one of the NPCs from the game and kind of reflavor them. So a blacksmith was missing. So suddenly the blacksmith was an orc, and his half-orc daughter wanted to try and avenge him, and she was quite good with swords. So it just kind of naturally flowed in. And the way we did it was that out of combat, I, as a DM, played her role, but tried to keep her out of the spotlight and let the players in the spotlight. But when it came to the combat side of things, I let the players take full control of her. So inventory, combat decisions, and they kind of had to decide between themselves what she would do. So they were role playing another character as well. So yeah, it worked out a lot better than I first expected.
Yeah, that's good. That's always good when that it just falls together. Just a quick little plug. If you are enjoying the show, please do give it a like. It helps show this to more people who might want to get their questions answered in future episodes, and we can help out. So make sure to give it a like if you are enjoying it so far. Right, so we got Tainted Innocent asked, how do you deal with players who tend to play arrogant, difficult, and non-team player types of characters? I feel like this is a problem that comes up quite a lot. People have a problem player and they don't know how to deal with them.
Well, I would
Any
say
advice?
it depends if it's the character or the player, if that makes sense. If it's just the character, then you can have a low charisma, rough around the edges sort of character that's more prone to get into accidents or into fights. But if it's the player, if you have a problem player, then the best thing you can do at the end of the session, take them aside and have a private conversation and say, okay, there's a little bit of tension. I'd talk to them about it. Make sure that there's a two-way conversation and you understand what they're feeling. You understand that they know what the feeling of the party is. And if you can't resolve it after that, then you kind of have to let them go. But that's one of the most difficult parts of being a DM, is asking a player to stop playing. It's not really fair, but as a DM, it's kind of your responsibility to take leadership in the party. Well, I say in the party, in the group of players. So yeah, it's almost like trying to fire someone in a real life. It doesn't get easy.
Yeah, I feel like there is no easy way of dealing with it because you have to have a chat, and especially if it's like a group of friends, and just turns out that one in the D&D environment is a bit difficult. It's a really difficult conversation. If you're playing with a bunch of people that you've just met at a local gaming shop, then it's a little bit easier because you can be like, it's not working. Maybe go and talk to these other groups and see if it works. But yeah, you have to talk to the player, really is the only way to get around it. And I feel like most of the time they'll be reasonable, they'll understand and be like, okay, well, either I don't want to play with you anymore because that's the type of character I want to play, or okay, sorry, I will change my character to be a bit better, is generally going to be the response. But it is awkward.
I think that if the player knows that they're playing an arrogant character and they incorporate it into the character arc, the story, and they evolve over time, then that's understandable. But as long as after the session is finished, everybody's on good terms, then they can play an arrogant character. Sometimes an arrogant or a difficult character can advance the story in directions that a more cohesive team might not go.
Yeah, definitely. We've had Byron Lee ask a question that we've already answered earlier in the stream. So, what is your favourite D&D monster, and why do you like that monster? So, just quickly to summarise, mine was the traditional Beholder, and I used to like the 5 rays and the anti-magic cone. When you first throw that at players that don't have a clue what it is, they really panic, and it is fun as a DM.
Well, the creature that you've mentioned before, the rust monster, if the player has no idea what the rust monster does, they think it's an innocent thing, it's not going to cause a lot of damage, but then the equipment starts falling apart and you can see the terror, like the color drains from their face as soon as they realize, wait a minute, this thing's not attacking my health points, it's attacking my equipment, which is probably more important to the player.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we answered a bit more, but that was the general gist of it. So next one, so how much of your player's backstory do you like to have before starting a campaign, Rich?
Enough for the DM to sink their teeth into, if that makes sense. If you give them a little bit of backstory, but you leave some blank patches, you leave some open-ended questions or characters that have disappeared in the past, then it can give the DM something to work with in the future when they are trying to develop the character a little bit more. And I think that if you're a good DM, you'll give each player and each character their own time in the spotlight.
Yeah,
So
definitely. I feel like there's not a sort of word number to that question. It is all about how much you can give to the DM to like I've had one paragraph backstories that have been more than enough for me to run with, and then I've had players that have given me a 15-page essay, which once again I can sink my teeth into. It just means I have to sit there and read 15 pages, which isn't a bad thing. It's
It
good that
depends
they're
on the
that into
class
it.
as well, because some classes they've already told most of their story. For example, the cleric has already became a cleric, but if you have a warlock, for example, they've just been given a power, and you don't know how they're going to use it. You don't know how the benefactor that's given them the power is going to react, and you can really wing it, for want of a better expression. You can improvise, and sometimes you can come up with better ideas than you would have planned out.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got Doris Solier. What do you do when it comes to massive writer's block when you're making a homebrew campaign? So I know you've made homebrew subclasses as well, so it could probably fit to that. How do you deal with writer's block?
Well, it's a hard topic to talk about, but what writer's block, it affects everybody. Don't feel like you're the only person that can't think of things to write about. But I find that taking a break and doing something that's completely different can really rejuvenate you. For example, if you're looking at the page and you can't think of what to write, go outside or plan a trip to the countryside or just do something that's outside of your comfort zone, because that'll take you out of the writer's block. It'll give you more inspiration. It'll give you some more creative ideas, hopefully. And if that doesn't work, you can just try and next 6 Red Bulls and hope for the best.
Indeed, I think that's pretty much the advice I would have given as well: is to get out, just stop and get out and do something different, even even if it's a little half an hour walk somewhere, or you could also try looking at other media. So watch a film, watch a TV program might help you out.
Well,
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to be getting out and doing something different.
so I think that reading some books or even a video game, I know it sounds strange, but if you play some video games, you can draw inspiration. Don't copy it word for word, but if you can get a new idea or an interesting twist on the original idea, then that can help out with writer's block.
Definitely. And Fry said he's going back to editing. So thank you for popping by,
Catch you later.
Fry, and enjoy editing. Okay, so if we jump to the next question. So how often do you use inspiration in your games? Or do you use it at all?
I don't really use it. It's one of those things, if I give out inspiration, it's normally at the start of the campaign and then I'll forget about it. And then when it comes to a key clutch moment in the story, someone will just roll the inspiration and it can turn the tide. But I wouldn't be giving it out in every opportunity. I would try to make it special.
I am really, really bad at remembering to give out inspiration. Like terrible. I never remember to. So what I do now is I tell the players. I say the players can suggest that inspiration is given out, and that works better. So one of the players would be like, "Oh, I think Barry just did a really good thing, and it should get inspiration." And then I can go, "Oh yeah, he should. You're right." And so I've sort of, because as a DM, you've got so much going on in your head, you've got so much to manage. Inspiration is just another thing, whereas the players can think about it more. And yeah, it
There's
works
always
quite
one
well.
min-max. There's always one min-maxer that goes for the Halfling luck build with inspiration and
Yeah,
bardic inspiration on top of it. So,
and then
yeah,
you
good
just
luck
make the
to you, buddy.
DC 58. That's it. So that's how
That's
you
it.
do it. Byron E said a good thing for a dungeon master is to try to stay a step ahead of the players and don't worry if things don't go exactly as planned. What are your thoughts on this?
Totally. As long as you're one step ahead of them, then you can improvise what could be going down. But when you're planning ahead, the best way to think about it is to try and get into the player's perspective and think the most what's the biggest thing that's going to happen? If you have something you think is guaranteed how they're going to react, try and write around that. But it's always good to understand the NPCs and villains' reactions, emotions, and character instead of writing a script of exactly what they're going to say. because guaranteed, if you write a monologue that's 10 paragraphs long, the barbarian's going to charge in the first sentence and try and get a crit.
Yeah, definitely. Those pesky barbarians. Yeah, one sort of bit that stands out in what you said there is trying to stay a step ahead of the players. And I don't think I've ever been a step ahead of the players. I'm always like chasing my tail and sort of making it up as I go along a lot of the time. I've got a plan. I've got like an overall plan, and I hope it goes in that general direction. But there's been so many times where you've planned for left and right, and they've decided to go up, and you're like, oh, I don't have anything there. Can I move left or right to be up? No. Okay. Well, there you go. I'm making stuff up for the next half an hour. Let's go. And some of the best story moments come from that as well, because you haven't overthought it. You're just going with what is coming in your head as you go along, and it starts to really impact the rest of the story.
If in doubt, throw a couple of giant spiders or some sentient furniture at them, and that'll keep them tided over until the next session where you can think of something.
Yeah, definitely. What is your favourite homebrew rule that you use, if you use any?
I don't know about homebrew rules, but one of my favorite homebrewed items has got to be the cloak of bacon. It was just something I made up in about 5 minutes in a 5-minute break, but it was a cloak. It, like any other cloak, it gave +1 AC, but the disadvantage on stealth checks because there was a really strong smell of bacon, and the players forgot about it until they had to get into a stealth section, and then, of course, I had to remind them about it, and they failed, and this led to them getting chased around by a couple of bugbears that were hungry. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking what scenario would bacon ruin it, but I guess, yeah, I was thinking more like infiltrating a human settlement or like humanoid settlement. But yeah, you're right. If there's like goblins or bugbears or owlbears and stuff like that, that's really gonna screw over your players.
It's one of those things where when you think of a cloak, you always think, "Oh, can it this invisible cloak?" But you don't use the other senses when it comes to making magic items. So smell, sound, they all add context, and if you pardon the pun, they add flavor to the game as well.
Definitely. Okay, so what do you do if you realize at the beginning of an encounter it's far too hard and probably going to kill the party if it carries on?
Well, you could add an NPC, or you could make a natural disaster, or if you try to modify the terrain and the field they're fighting on to give the players an advantage, that's a subtle way to try and weave an advantage in for them. But at the same time, it's not too obvious that you're uh, changing on the fly.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't think you should be TPKing in the first session unless you're a really vindictive DM. And if the players are into that sort of thing, then go ahead. But if they write a 15-page backstory and then they die at level 1, I'm sure it's going to be a few tantrums getting thrown.
Yeah, definitely. I think most of my players aren't that in the know of D&D monsters and stuff, so I could probably get away with just down in the hit points of the encounters and stuff like that, just putting them down on the fly, making them maybe do a bit less damage and stuff like that. But I really like your idea and have used it before of having an NPC come in and like save the day. It's a really dramatic moment, especially if you leave it as last minute as you can, and then they come and save the day, and then there's that whole dynamic about you now owe them one and stuff like that. It can make quite a good story beat that to go forward with as well, which is cool.
I think the worst thing is when, and this happens in every single Lost Mines campaign I've played, the players always think they can go toe to toe with Venom Fang, who's deliberately designed a green dragon. He's designed to be unstoppable. So I think if you let them steal some gold and get out of there and let him fly off to get some more cultists or something, just make the villain more villainous. Let them survive.
Yeah, definitely. We got another question from Byron Lee as well. So, is there a D&D book that you keep going back to because you find it so useful?
Player's Handbook, is that too easy?
Well, yeah, I guess
That's
the
the
core.
standard.
Yeah, Player's Handbook and Monster Manual are the obvious two. I also use Xanavars quite a lot. Xanavars subclasses and stuff like that. I feel like
I'll tell you a
there would
strange
be
one. It's not a D&D book, but the Pathfinder manual, because it's always interesting to see a different perspective on what is essentially a very similar world, a similar structure, but they have different ideas for rules and technicalities that you can draw inspiration from, as long as you're not copying one for one.
Yeah, I actually a while back went back and read the third edition Monster Manual again to get some inspiration, and fourth edition Monster Manual as well, because it has changed quite a lot, and there's still some stuff from those editions that you can learn from and bring into fifth edition. Like I really like the idea of having minions for monsters where they just got one hit point and they're just there to be a nuisance, really. But it you can't really, not easily anyway, in fifth edition do a like Helm's Deep scene. You know, when there's like thousands and thousands of orcs, or like a thousands of zombies scene. You can't do that easily, and I feel like that's a bit of a step in a direction of being able to do it again.
Well, when you're going into that sort of territory, you're going into more wargaming, or Warhammer is the good example,
Yeah.
where you're pushing hundreds of models at a time and rolling thousands of dice. But I think the game of D&D is more designed around a small party interacting with NPCs, interacting with a more small scale thing. That's why I find sometimes the game does show a little bit of weakness when you get to level 15 plus, because the players are so powerful, apart from the fighter and barbarian, but the other players are so powerful that they can bend reality, so the rules don't really apply. It's more about telling the story.
Yeah, what is the largest level campaign you've DM'd for? What's the largest level they've got to?
I want to say level 12. I'm not a
Okay.
big fan of the high level campaigns, to be honest, but everybody has a different style. What about
Yeah.
you?
I tried it once doing the high level. I think we got to 18. But it is so hard as a DM. Well, my style is very open worldy, like let the players do what they want to do and then go with the punches. And that just becomes so hard when they've got wish and when they've got, gate and spells like that. And it's really hard to just manage what is going on. So I don't think I would do it again. I've only gone that high once.
I think for one shots it can be fun, as
Yeah,
long as you
definitely.
agree beforehand. The fly is going to be okay, but teleporting might break the game. But yeah, if you have like a stealthy mission one shot, or a more combat gladiatorial one shot, then these are great things. If you just throw a couple of purple worms at them and then see how they're going to get out of that situation.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I've got one more question set up. So if you are in the chat and you have any more questions, let me know, because we're going to be ending soon. And if you have enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe. We are going to do this every Sunday at the same time. So come along, get your questions answered, and then hopefully we can improve your D&D game. So the last one that I have prepared, unless any more come in the live chat, is if half of your group are min-maxers and the other half aren't, can it still be a fun experience for everyone? And I guess to extend that, how can you manage that?
As long as everybody's on the same page, if the min-maxers are okay with letting the role players have their time, and vice versa, it's more of a balancing act, but essentially you need to make sure everybody's okay with the styles of play beforehand. But if you have a half min-maxers, half role play group, then you really need to let them shine in their own ways. You take some of the famous D&D streamers. Not everybody is a min-maxer, not everybody is a role player, but they all work together as a cohesive unit. So it's about finding players you gel with.
Yeah, definitely. I think in our last campaign we had one guy that was a min-maxer and didn't really care so much about role playing, and the rest really liked role playing. And you're right that because he was completely fine with them having their time, and then I made sure to make sure he could have his time. It worked completely fine. You just have to manage it as a DM, which can be difficult because sometimes roleplay just takes longer than you think it will be, or the combat takes longer than you think it will be, and whatnot. But as long as all the players are on the same page, that's the important part, really, and they all understand. Cool.
Well,
Do you have it? Oh, go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
going to say with when you have a mixture of min-maxers, role players, and anyone else in between, explorers, you want to say, that's the three pillars covered. I think that if you have a guideline setting for what the tone of the campaign is going to be before you begin, then everybody's more likely to be on the same page. It's when one person walks in expecting a mega dungeon and the other one wants a political intrigue game like Game of Thrones, well, the good parts of Game of Thrones. Let's not get carried away with dragons. But you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Did you have any questions that you had burning on your tongue, Rich, that you would like to talk about?
Who would win a fight between 100 goblins and one adult dragon?
I'd say an adult dragon.
Well, it's got the AoE attack, isn't it?
Yeah, it just burn them, and I can't remember, but I think they've got resistance to non-magic piercing, bludgeoning, and the other one slashing damage.
Yeah,
which means the goblins would be doing nothing really. And if you were mid-maxing it, the dragon would just fly about.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Wait till it got recharged, and then just keep breath weaponing them. Unfortunately, poor goblins. I think they would get beaten.
Here's one for you. What do you think is the best book for new players after they have picked up the player's handbook?
I think it's the Lost Mines of Fandelver. Well, I'm thinking of a DM point of view, actually. New players, probably Xanathars, I think.
Would you
'Cause
say
there's so many.
Xanathars or Tashas? Which one would you prefer?
I think Xanathars, because it's got the addition of just because it's got the addition of like how to use tools in your game and all those different additional rules that weren't as thought out in the player's handbook. It sort of helps a bit more to new players understand that, I would say.
Well, the downtime rules as well. That's downtime and crafting. It's the sort of thing that was missing from the player's handbook.
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember the name of it, and it's going to annoy me because I like calling people up. But there was someone who homebrewed how to do like better ways of doing downtime and learning how to use tools and learning different languages and stuff like that.
I think Dale Kingsmill has done something like that, and I know for a fact that not Matthew. There's Matthew Mercer, Matthew Perkins, and then there's the other one which I can't remember. Colville, that's the one. There's the three Matthews in D&D.
Yeah, he's done the Kingdoms. Well, he's got the Kingdoms and Warfare that's just come out, I think, and he did the Followers one as well, which are they're pretty heavy rules, I would say. But yeah, they're quite good. But yeah, there was some. It's going to annoy me. It was really early in 5e as well. It was like almost immediately as it came out, they realised there was this gap in the rules and made a homebrew thing. But yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, what about you? What book would you suggest for new players after the Player's Handbook?
Well, I would say it depends on if they're looking for subclasses. I'd say Tasha's over Xanathars, but if they're looking for more generalized rules, then Xanathars. But
yeah, I agree.
I would say that it depends on if they're making their second character. If you make your first character, you normally stick to the same class and the more traditional things. But when you're making your second one, you really want to let your imagination go wild and try and explore the outer reaches of the D&D universe.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about it, Tasha's also one which introduced the Artificer as well, wasn't it? And magical tattoos. So
I think the Artificer was in, or the Artificer, depending on which part of the world you're from. But I think that came in Eberron first.
Oh, okay.
And then it was adapted to Tasha's because it was just such an in-demand subclass or class. I mean, Pathfinder had something like that from the beginning. So, yeah, it was purely because it was such a high demand. I do think they dropped the ball with some of the subclasses with the Artificer, but there are plenty of homebrew rules and ways around it. It just depends on what sort of magic items you want to give them as a DM.
Okay, we're going to wrap up, Rich, but because we were just talking about subclasses, I think this will be a good opportunity to talk about the subclasses you've made. you have
Oh,
created subclasses that people can access through your Patreon. Is that right?
Yeah.
So just for your
Well,
Patreon.
the mentor fighter is always going to be free. That's the first one
Okay.
that I made, and I think that it's a great way to give out free content just to get people interested, and it's fun to play as well. I mean, the idea of a mentor, an older figure that works within the party and gives advice and helps buff up the party, is very unique for a fighter because, generally speaking, the fighter is all about crit fishing and dealing as much damage or being tanky. But with this, you can really support the team in and out of combat without just throwing extra hit points and healing them up. So there's the mentor fighter, there's a herbalist ranger, which I think hopefully solves the potion situation because the ranger has favored terrain, and depending on which terrain you enjoy, you can pick up different effects and abilities for the potions. There's a list of healing potions and more offensive potions, and I think there's two more that I've released. The dragon patron warlock. There's a sorcerer dragon, but I thought that the warlock dragon is just a massive omission from the books. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
that's
going to
good.
be in the up and coming Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, so it's free real estate. Just go for it, you know?
Yeah, that's good. That is weird that they missed that one out. Actually, it's now that you said it, it seems quite obvious. But I am also I didn't include your Patreon in the description, so I have just added that now. So if anyone does want to check out, which is subclasses, go down into the description and check out his Patreon, and of course go and check out Rich's channel. Is all about D&D, which is exactly what you're here for.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up there. Do you also want people to go to your Twitter? Is that your main social media of choice?
Well, I don't really use Twitter as much as I should, but that's like the second one. I try to stick to the community tab on YouTube or
Nice.
Twitter is a good second handle, but the problem is Rich Merry was already taken. I don't know by who. So it's Rich Merry 0 on Twitter. Just add the number 0 at the end of it, and you should find me no problem.
Perfect. So yeah, if you want to go see what is going on with Rich, do that. And he also has his own Discord, which is quite active actually. He's got a very nice community over there. So go and check out his Discord. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for asking your questions. Before next week, if you have any questions you would like answered, put them in the comments of this video, or go over to the Discord and put them into Ask a DM channel. But thank you all for coming very much. And until next time, happy gaming.
Shout out to Byron.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.